much for being here this afternoon. My name is Matthew Dix. I am the artistic director of Speak Up. I run Speak Up with my wife. She's going to be actually hosting the show. I'm just going to say a few things, and then I'm going to introduce her and pass her off on to you. First, I just want to give a quick thank you out to Kaya Pazdursky. She's my production assistant, and she is here today, actually jumping in at the last minute, helping us get people in. So I can see the waiting room right now. There's about a dozen people in the waiting room. And right now, Kaya is feverishly checking the names on a list versus the people in the waiting room and making sure they match up. So she's making that job much easier for us. So thank you for being here, Kaya. I know you can't see her, but behind the scenes, she is helping to make things happen. So much appreciated. I want to let you know that if you like the show today, you may be new to storytelling, you may be new to Speak Up. We are producing shows all the time. We hope to get back to live audiences in actual venues in 2022. That is our hope. I think we are sort of on that path and it's looking pretty good. But we do have one more show this year. If you're interested, it's a virtual show like this one. It is on December 4th. It is in conjunction with the Connecticut Historical Society. It will not be stories related to the Holocaust or genocide. It will be stories around a different theme, perhaps a more festive theme given the time of year. So if you'd like to see a show that is not like this one, you can check out our website, speakupstorytelling.com, and you can find information about attending that show there. I think Alicia is going to tell you everything else, so I'm just going to introduce Alicia to you. I usually tell a little story about my wife as a means of introducing her. Yesterday was my son's Little League playoff game. This made no sense to me since his team was 0-12. They failed to win a game. They were beaten by at least 10 runs in every game, but somehow in 2021, everyone gets to be in the playoffs. My son's father, who happens to be me, I was happy for him to be able to play in another game and yet be defeated again, this time by my own student. My 5th grade student pitched a no-hitter against my son's class yesterday. So you can imagine how that's going to go for him tomorrow when he arrives in school. It's not going to go well for him. But we had a party after the game and my wife was in charge of the cake. And so I picked up the cake at Stop and Shop. And when I saw it and its decorative nature, I knew Alicia was not going to be happy. Whoever decorated the cake, handwriting was an issue for this person. Obviously, they did not attend my wife's kindergarten classroom. The lettering was poorly formed. There really was no decoration. It was essentially what I could have done had I decorated the cake. I was worried that Alicia was going to be upset by this because sometimes these things tend to rile her up. And I thought, great, this is gonna create some agita in my home. The cake came home and the first thing she did was she laughed at it. The next thing she did was take out her own decorations from the cabinet. She zhuzhed it up. She made it lovely. It was a joyful moment. And I was just so proud of her that she didn't get upset about it and that she recovered and did a great thing. The cake looked great. And I thought you did a great job. There are times in Alicia's life when things aren't quite right like this, and it will just irritate her for about 45 minutes, which of course interrupts my life as well. And I'm always worried about my happiness. So I was happy that Alicia was able to do that. And I was I'm impressed with her ability to zhuzh up that cake. Okay. Well done, honey.
Thank you.
All right, come over here and sit on the stool.
All right.
Thank you. How about a round of applause from my wife, who's going to host the show, the executive director of Speak Up, Alicia Dix.
Hi, you guys. Yeah, the cake was subpar, but it tasted delicious, and sprinkles save a lot of things. So that's that. Even if you've lost all of your games, you still deserve a pretty cake. So, all right, let's get started. Good afternoon and welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon. Matt and I are always so happy and so honored to be able to work with Voices of Hope. This is one of our favorite things that we do, and it's very meaningful and special, and we're really glad that you're joining us here to experience it with all of us together today. I'm going to start by giving you a brief overview of the Speak Up Voices of Hope collaboration, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what you can expect today, and then I will introduce our awesome storytellers. Matt and I founded Speak Up at the very table where this computer is propped up on a stack of books back in 2012. We developed a love for personal narrative storytelling after listening to the Moth Radio Hour for a long time, and then Matt started going to New York and Boston to tell stories in their events. We wanted a chance for him to tell stories here in the local area and for other people, other storytellers, to be able to tell stories closer to home and rather than traveling to New York and Boston. And so we were inspired to start Speak Up, and that was 2012. And since then, we have really been thrilled to work with so many incredible storytellers, amazing organizations, and just fantastic venues. It's really been more than we could have possibly imagined. In 2016, we were contacted by Kathy Fishman and the crew at Voices of Hope to join forces and create a program where the children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors could tell their own stories and weave in the stories of the survivors in their lives. This showcase today marks the 7th showcase that we've done with Voices of Hope, and we're just so happy to be able to help people share their stories this way and to make it so that you guys can all hear them. Always when we do this show, I feel the weight of the importance of these stories reaching people, reaching people's ears and their hearts and their souls. Just this past week, a school administrator, you might have heard this, a school administrator in Texas who is in charge of her district's curriculum, I want to read this so I can make sure that I get it right, told the teachers that if they have a book about the Holocaust in their classroom, they should also offer students access to a book from an opposing perspective, which I can't begin to imagine what kind of things she thinks should be available in these classrooms. Does she want like Holocaust denial literature? Does she want a viewpoint that says the Holocaust was okay? I'm not sure what her point was. But what I do know is that stories like this, that are all too regular, reinforce the importance of keeping the true stories of people's experiences alive and easy to access. There is no opposing perspective to genocide that deserves a platform, especially a platform in a school. In addition to stories told by the family of Holocaust survivors, this afternoon we're going to be hearing 2 stories of more recent genocides in Rwanda and Bosnia. This is new to our showcase and is another reminder of why, even though it is hard to tell and to hear stories like this, it's crucially important that we bear witness to them. You probably have all heard the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quote when he said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." By bringing light to these stories and showering love upon these survivors, we can take steps together to bring more light into the world. This afternoon, you'll be hearing 5 true stories from genocide survivors and the loved ones of survivors, and also one from Matt about this process of working with these amazing folks. After almost 2 years of hosting storytelling shows on Zoom, I have learned some things that I think make the listening and viewing experience better, and I'm going to share those tips with you right now. So first of all, I want to encourage you, if you're comfortable, to turn on your camera and let people see you. I think that being able to, for me, I can speak to my own experience. I can't do this if I'm not looking at people in their boxes. If I am speaking to what looks like myself, I can't speak that way, or to a dark screen. We need to know that we're speaking to actual people and that you guys are hearing us and feeling what we're saying. So for the storytellers, turn on your cameras if you feel comfortable and be an audience. And in addition to that, as an audience, I really encourage you to turn on grid view, which you can find in kindergarten. We call it going to the waffle. If you look at the top right-hand corner of your screen, there'll be a little waffle and it says view, and you can click on it and then you can choose grid view. And what that does is it lets you see what I'm seeing right now, which is lots of little postage stamp sized boxes with people and their lovely faces in them. The next piece of advice I have for you is to turn off your ringing devices. When you are in the theater, we know we turn our phones off so that we don't want to be that person whose phone is ringing and disturbing the audience and the storytellers or the people who are performing. In this case, you're not going to disturb the storytellers or the people or me because you're on mute, but you will disturb yourself and it will take you out of the moment. It will take you away from the story. So for yourself, turn your devices off, give yourself over to this time to hearing these stories and let yourself just be in the moment. I'm going to show you about sign language applause. Sign language applause is like this. You put your hands up and, you know, you can certainly do this and this is nice. We see that. but I don't know, this looks a little festive. I learned in the kindergarten recently how to do a firework, which is like this. And it's a little like the sign language applause. It looks nice, it's festive. Oh, and you can feel free to type in the comments to make kind comments to the storytellers after their stories. Don't type while they are speaking because a little thing might come up and disturb them, but you can go ahead and type while I'm speaking. I teach kindergarten. I can just tune that right out. Lastly, I encourage you guys to really lean into the fact that even though we are on screen, this is a live event. And that even though we are not together in one theater, this is different than when you are watching Squid Game or whatever you're watching on Netflix and you are, not part of what's going on there. Here you are part of it, and we have all chosen to be here together today. We are a community at this live event together in a different 2021 kind of way. But I think it helps to remember that this is live and that we are all here together. So that's my introduction, and now let's get started. All right, so opening our show tonight is Linda Grosser. Linda is coming to us from her home in Newton Highlands, Massachusetts. Linda's been telling stories since 2018 and recently produced 2 outdoor storytelling events in her hometown called Storied Nights, which is a great name, Linda. In what she calls her prior life, she worked at Boston University and IBM. Prior to all of our shows, you guys, I always ask our storytellers a question that will help us get to know a little bit about them before they tell their stories. And this time, I think, with all of us doing very little visiting and very little traveling, I was wondering, what's the best place you've ever been? Maybe we can get some ideas about where we can go when all of this is behind us. Linda said her favorite place is any ocean. And then she shared this beautiful story with me. She went on to say, rain or shine, beach combing, boogie boarding, playing in the waves, walking the beach, listening to the waves, it's my happy place. I especially love going to Hull, Massachusetts, which reminds me of Long Beach, New York, where my grandparents lived when I was young. I would go for summers, collecting shells, eating ice cream, playing under the boardwalk. It's got the same wide Long Beach in a small working class town. Not a lot of fanfare, just the ocean and the beach. That sounds like a very idyllic, happy place. Please welcome Linda Grosser. Oh.
Thank you, Alicia. My sister and I are in Vienna, and we're waiting on the platform for the number 60 tram. And I'm looking around, just sort of soaking up the old world atmosphere. I'm standing there, and a pigeon craps on me. And there's this woman next to me, and she says and smiles, that means good luck. And I'm thinking, well, that's good, because on the very first day, Andy and I have already had some tension between us, something that had to do with the place that we were staying at. I had to convince her to come on this trip. We were not close growing up, and as adults, we had never spent not even one night, just us, together on a trip. And now we have 21 days. This is a roots trip. Our father, Rudolf Grosser, later Rudy, grew up in Vienna. Vienna, a city of culture and grandeur, an elegant coffee house on every corner. And his was a life of privilege. Private school, skiing in the Alps, summers at the Black Sea. And I wanted to come to this place where he had once thrived and then was forced to flee. And lucky, the whole family got out. So we had decided early on that we did want to go to where he had lived. So with the address in hand, we're on the tram. We get out in the old town, in the historic town, and we From there, it's a quick walk across the Danube Canal to Leopoldstadt, the Jewish section since the 1600s. We arrive, number 114, Hollandstrasse. And I can't believe it. I am looking up at this ornate Baroque style apartment building. This is where my father had lived. This was the place that he would return from work every day, taking that same 10-minute walk that we just took from the old town. So we're looking at these massive wooden doors that are locked, trying to figure out what do we do now. And just then the door opens and a woman comes out, and we have like a second to decide, and we just slip in like we belong. So inside we hear voices and we walk to the back, and in this courtyard is a sukkah. So a sukkah is like a makeshift hut that Jews build to celebrate the harvest festival. We meet the family that's there and start talking to them. We tell them our whole story. We tell them that our dad lived in this building 80 years ago. They invite us into their sukkah. They invite us to sit down at their table. They give us cake. They give us fruit salad. And we meet all of their adorable children, Ben and Rachel and Tzvi, and everybody is talking. And I am thinking, my kitchen table when I was a kid was nothing like this. My father would be in his own world. He would be listening to classical music on this little black transistor radio. And I can't remember him ever talking to us about anything, telling us a story, asking us. Any little tidbits we knew about his life was from our mother. And that culture of silence was such in our family that my own sister and I did not talk. And it was his silence, in part, really, that brought me to Vienna, to learn something about him, to learn where I came from. So Andy and I had agreed that we both wanted to have an experience of the music in Vienna. It was such a big part of his life. We go to the Musikverein, this famous concert hall. And people are elegantly dressed, unlike us. And then we look in the program and we see that the guest conductor tonight is none other than Andris Nelsons from the Boston Symphony, where I live. After the concert, we reminisce about Dad's little radio and how our grandmother could, within the first 10 seconds, recognize any piece of classical music. So we leave and we cut through this fancy hotel lobby, and there's a gala music event going on, and we go out the front door, and just then, getting out of this limousine is another Boston conductor, Keith Lockhart from the Boston Pops. And my sister says, I have never done anything like this. And she charges ahead, puts out her hand and says, Mr. Lockhart, my name is Andy Goodman. This is my sister, Linda Grosser. We're from Boston and we are your biggest fans. And we just came from the Musikverein and we saw Andris Nelsons. And he says, oh, that's weird. I didn't know he was in town too. And we had a chuckle. So we saw 2 more concerts and 1 opera on that trip. Every day was a new adventure. Turned out we both really loved hiking in the Vienna woods. And we'd go to some mountain lodge. One time we had this delicious pumpkin soup. And then Andy threw up the pumpkin soup. But it was amazing. We were so simpatico about food. When, what, and where we would eat our meals. And we wanted 3 meals. So we'd have breakfast at the apartment, and then we'd go out and we'd have some midday meal like schnitzel. And then in the evening, without fail, our meal was dessert. And normally it was going in search of these crepes that were filled with jam that our grandmother used to make, and they were called palachinkin. Often we would have to, for the menu items, we would put the German into Google Translate. And one time we did that, and it came out minced peckers. We didn't order that. So I did not understand German really at all. And before the trip, I tried to learn a little with this app, Duolingo, and my sister did the same. When we get to Vienna, after a little while there, Andrea starts speaking in full sentences and conversations in German. And I'm looking at her like, who is this person? And she thinks it came back to her because until she was 3, she and my parents lived with my Austrian grandparents in New York City, and they only spoke German. After I came along and we moved to New Jersey, what I remember is that when we would visit his Mutti, his mother, my father would speak German then, or to his only 2 friends, Hans and Jimmy, also from Vienna. Hearing Andy, my sister, speak German like that, it was just bittersweet. You know, I had this visceral feeling of comfort and familiarity. But then I would get sad, remembering and thinking about how my dad really never reclaimed his voice when he got to New York. In 1938, November 9th and 10th, it was Kristallnacht. Those were 2 days of Nazi violence and destruction across all of Austria and all of Germany. And they destroyed Jewish homes, Jewish businesses, synagogues. My father was arrested, he was beat up. He almost lost his life because he didn't get the insulin that he needed. And he became desperate. I mean, it was still possible. The Nazis would let you emigrate at that point, but it was really tough to find a country and get a visa because you needed to have a financial sponsor. So we got this idea. We went to the post office. We found these phone books, all these cities from the US, and he looked up people whose name was Grosser. And he wrote them letters and asked if they would pretend to be a cousin and to sponsor him. And then he waited. And one day he gets a letter from a dentist, a Dr. David Grosser from Boston, who agreed. My dad fled on April 9th, 1939. And he found out later that they had come for him the following week. He landed in New York City at the age of 26. It should have been the prime of his life. Being in Austria now, I understood his legacy in a new way. Today, the Austrians still have not really acknowledged and faced up to what happened during that time period. And I saw that my father was brave. He found a way out and he survived. And the other thing I appreciated was his delightful European charm and culture that he did bring with him. And I remember when I was like 10, I would put both my feet on his feet and he would teach me how to waltz. So before this whole trip, I got some information from this Jewish Viennese organization. And they told me that my great grandmother, Pauline, was buried in Vienna in 1942. And I am incredulous because apparently, or supposedly, everybody had gotten out in 1939. But more than that, I've had hanging in my house all these years a needlepoint with a stitched signature, Pauline Lustig. And all this time, it was just this thing hanging on my wall. No one ever talked about her. And now it turns out she is still in Vienna. Section 10, row 3, plot 31. Andy and I go to the Vienna Central Cemetery. We find the section and the row. And when we get to plot 31, there is nothing there. It is just grass. And I am so disappointed. The office had assured us that Pauline was there. That was her spot. And sometimes there were no headstones because there was no money. So I'm just standing around on the grass. And then I hear my sister, Linda, come and help me. And I turn around and I see Andrea. She's digging in the dirt behind the headstone next to Pauline's spot. And now we are both yanking on this stupid slab of cement that Andy saw stuck in the ground. It comes free. We brush off the dirt. On this headstone, engraved, Pauline Lustig, 1865-1942. I don't know if I want to laugh or cry. Andy and I, we have literally unearthed our own great-grandmother's marker. It feels like we have resurrected Pauline herself. We laugh, we hug, we take selfies. When I get back to Boston, people would ask me, what was the best part of your trip? And I would remember listening to that music that my dad loved, standing in the house that he lived in and finding Pauline. And then without a moment's hesitation, I would say the best part of the trip was laughing and giggling with my sister. I traveled 4,000 miles to learn about my father and where I came from. And I did that. But really what I found my sister. I love you, Andy. Thank you.
That was fantastic, Linda. What a beautiful way to open our show. And what an amazing story with so many incredible, gorgeous connections. Just your whole story from beginning to end was just connection after connection, and just really beautiful and beautifully told. So thank you so much for sharing that. So one thing I forgot to say when I started the show, and I reminded you all that we're together, is I forgot an important piece that I always tell our listeners at Speak Up shows, which is your job as an audience is to transmit all of your love and positivity to the people telling their stories. And I probably don't need to tell you that in a showcase like this. If you weren't a person ready to transmit love and healing and goodness, you wouldn't be here. But I always know it's a little hokey to say to do that, but I really do think, especially when we're like this on Zoom and not all together, it's just so important for everyone to know that you guys are out there just sending it. And Linda, I hope you felt everybody sending it, even though I forgot to remind them. I don't know that they need the reminder, but it's a good vibe, even over Zoom. So thank you very much, Linda. All right, I'm going to move along to introduce our next storyteller. Next, we're going to hear from Bakir Hadzik. Bakir is 16 years old, you guys, which makes him the youngest storyteller we've ever had at Speak Up. Bakir lives in Hartford and is a senior at Connecticut River Academy. That's a high school, you guys. He's 16 in East Hartford. He plans to study international relations or political science during college and then intends to go on to law school. When I asked about his favorite place he's ever visited, here's what he said. And Bakir, I forgot to go over these pronunciations with you, so I'm going to do my best. But if I'm wrong, then you can fix it when I'm done. He said, of all the places I visited, I think the starry most, is it most or most?
Starry most, yeah, you got it right.
Okay, good. Also called the Old Bridge, which is easier to pronounce. In Mostar, Bosnia and Herzegovina has got to be my favorite. Whenever my family vacations in Bosnia over the summers, we always make sure to take a day trip to Mostar. Is it Mostar?
Mostar, yeah.
Okay. We'll hole ourselves up in a car for a couple of hours, stopping by the road to buy fresh fruits before eventually arriving at the starry most. When climbing the bridge, you have to practice the utmost care. The white cobblestone it's made of is very slippery and it's not hard to trip. But when you climb to the top of the starry most, the view is worth the long car ride and precarious journey up. The view of the river Neretva.
Yeah.
Okay, is one of the most beautiful things in the world. A winding blue dragon surrounded by lush greenery and houses that are hundreds of years old. There's nothing better than standing there and enjoying the view, especially when you're with your family. Well, first of all, that sounds like a magical fairy tale. And second of all, I'm not sure that you're truly 16, as you have the soul of a wizened, experienced, brilliant writer. That was so beautiful. So thank you for taking us on that gorgeous journey. And I'm looking forward to hearing your story. Please welcome Bakir Hadzik.
As children, we've all experienced getting lost. Usually, you'll have a memory of walking around in the store excitedly before separating from your parents to explore. While everything might seem like fun and games for a while, there comes a moment when your brain switches from an attitude of playfulness to one of sheer terror. You realize, hey, where's my mom? Or, hey, where's my dad? And that realization freezes you up. I've had my fair share of experiences like this. Most clearly, I remember getting lost in my local Stop and Shop when I was in kindergarten. I snuck away from my mom in order to look at some junk food, and the next thing I knew, I couldn't find her anywhere. I was terrified. I started running around, frantically looking for her, and luckily, she was also on the lookout for me. And when she saw me, she rushed over and scooped me up. Of course, she severely reprimanded me, but my mother still gripped me into a hug that felt suffocating and smothered my face with kisses. I think that moment especially resonated with my mother because of her background. As a little girl growing up during the Bosnian genocide, she had an experience just as similar, but even more terrifying. My mother was born in Rodashi, a small town in what was then Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was a communist confederation made up of several different nation states, similar to the Soviet Union. My mother was born in Bosnia and Herzegovina, one of those nation states, to a Muslim family. Her childhood was, for the most part, happy and peaceful, but things soon changed. In the early 1990s, Yugoslavia fell apart. The various nation states that created it, such as Serbia, Croatia, and Slovenia, declared independence. When Bosnia did the same, all hell broke loose. You see, Bosnia was a country sharply divided by ethnicity and religion. About 50% of Bosnia was Bosnian Muslim. The other 50% was split between Bosnian Serbs and Bosnian Croats, who were both Christian. The Bosnian Muslims in Bosnia wanted independence, but the Serbs and Croats wanted to secede from Bosnia, joining their respective nation states. When the Muslims declared independence, Bosnian Serb military forces began a civil war as they fought to take over several parts of Bosnia and have them join with Serbia. During this process, the Bosnian Serbs began a wide-scale campaign of ethnic cleansing and genocide. They would forcefully remove Bosnian Muslims from their hometowns or kill them. All of this was part of a plan to create a greater Serbia, an ethnically homogeneous Serbian state. When these Bosnian Serb forces began to approach my mother's hometown, her family quickly realized that they had to flee. They packed up a few possessions and quickly left. This soon became a routine for them. My mother's family would settle in a new town, the Serbs would approach, and they'd flee again, avoiding destruction and death everywhere they went. Then, finally, after several years, my mother's family made their way to Srebrenica. Srebrenica was a town designated as a United Nations safe zone during the conflict. It was protected by United Nations peacekeepers, and no harm could come to those in its borders. My mother's family once again settled down, relying on foreign aid and refugee camps to survive. At the very least, they were safe. But then, the Bosnian Serb army made their way to Srebrenica in July 1995. They surrounded the town and walked in. The UN peacekeepers did not stop them. After several days in Srebrenica, the Bosnian Serb army began separating the Muslim women, children, and elderly from the men. Then, the women, children, and the elderly were herded into buses and driven out of Srebrenica. My mother was one of those set for deportation. Her father was to stay behind. As she, her mother, and her sisters made their way to the buses, she clung on tightly to her mother's hand. But somehow, in the bustling crowd, that tight grip was broken. My mother was quickly engulfed in the crowd, unable to find her mother or her family under the summer heat. There she was, alone, without anyone in the world, being pushed forward by a furious crowd, desperate to get out of Srebrenica. She was terrified. My mother managed to break free of the crowd and decided to make her way back to where she'd left her father. She thought that she'd stay behind with him. Miraculously, she was able to find him, but instead of letting her stay with him, her father decided not to leave her behind. He had a bad feeling. So he took her in his arms and carried her to the deportation buses. Thankfully, there were still a few left, about to leave Srebrenica. He got onto each and looked around for a relative, someone who could take my mother for the time being and reunite her with her family. Luckily, he was able to find an aunt on one of those last buses and gave my mother to her. My mother remembers him kissing her and then walking off the bus. When the bus pulled away, she remembers looking out a window and seeing him standing there, smiling at her. After several more twists and turns, my mother managed to survive the Bosnian War and genocide and reunited with her family. But she also learned what had happened in Srebrenica after the deportations. All the men left there, some 8,000 plus in total, had been slaughtered by the Bosnian Serb army. My mother had been the last person in her family to see her father alive. Thankfully, when I got separated from my mother in that Stop and Shop, she took me to our home, and I walked into the kitchen to see my father, living and loving, sitting at the dinner table. My mother never got that. She came here to America after the genocide and started building a new life, but she never forgot the memories she had of Bosnia, of her father, the good and the bad, and she made sure that I never forgot those memories. Even as a child, she'd sit me down and tell me stories of her childhood, slightly sanitized at that time, of course. She described growing up, her journey across her homeland, the losses, the pain. But she also always emphasized the love, the gifts her father would bring her, the time she spent playing with her siblings, the house that she grew up in. Even though she had endured so much, her childhood wasn't just confined to the pain. That understanding has always stuck with me. I don't just see my mother's story as one of terror, of being lost with no way out. There is light there, however dim. There is happiness, if you look for it. Her life didn't just end as the war ended. The genocide might have defined my mother's childhood, but she didn't let it define the rest of her life. She came to America and started a new one. She kept her memories close. She kept her father close. She made sure that I knew her story, knew her journey, knew her father, so that those stories, those experiences, that love would never be forgotten. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so glad to understand where I come from and why I'm here. I don't want those memories to die with me. I want to make sure that the sands of time don't erode my mother's story away. Today, I'm so blessed to be able to stand here with the ability to guide my mother's story out of the woods and out into the world. I'm glad to be able to find it after it's been lost in a grocery store, looking for some place to be shared. Thank you.
Beautifully done, Bakir. Oof, you know, thank you so much, not just for that beautiful story of pride in your mother and common experiences that so many of us have had in losing track of our loved ones or getting lost ourselves. But also, I will tell you, I mean, this all happened during my lifetime and I know very little about it. And I think that what Voices of Hope is doing to not just represent the children and grandchildren and survivors of the Holocaust, but genocide education overall is what we all need to make sure that we know that this is happening now and that we can do something. So thank you for that education and for that beautiful story. Your parents must be insanely proud of you. And I'm sure that any school that you apply to and you say, I'm here to study international relations, should shower you with funding. So just well done. All right, let's introduce our next storytellers. All right, now I have the pleasure of introducing our first mother and daughter Speak Up team, Sally Rosenberg and Rachel Rosenblatt. Sally lives nearby in the Hartford area in Glastonbury, Connecticut. She is a mom of 3, and she says she's fortunate to practice the art and science of dentistry, which I loved and I think is a really more beautiful than saying I'm a dentist, which is great, but the art and science of dentistry sounds especially lovely. Rachel currently lives in Washington, D.C., where she works in criminal justice reform and enjoys trail running and propagating plants, which I can attest is a very addictive hobby. Sally said that Yosemite National Park is by far one of her favorite places. She wrote, with the thunderous flowing water and waterfalls, you feel the forces of nature and its power. At that moment, you realize how small we are in the world. And Rachel's favorite place that she's visited is Chiang Rai, which is a city in the mountains of Northern Ireland. And if you look it up online, you'll see it's stunning. Sounds exotic and amazing. Please welcome Sally Rosenberg and Rachel Rosenblatt to tell their story together.
During the cold months of the pandemic, visits with my mother, my 92-year-old mother, were outside. She was masked with a hat, gloves, a blanket under a heater. All I saw were her bright blue eyes, just like my daughter's.
Our visits outside during the pandemic were strained, especially in the cold, usually marked by Bubby's common refrain, "What do you want from me?" Having missed the 1918 Spanish flu by not that many years, Bubby was living through yet another historical event, and my mom and I were determined to weather it outside with her.
People would say to us, "Isn't it too cold for her to be outside?" My response was that she survived 2 years in the forest from 1943 through 1944. She's tough. That piqued my interest to relearn her story. Fortunately, there's a good amount of documentation of my mother's life. I rewatched the Steven Spielberg's 1995 video about her survival and listened to the interview made by United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in 2006. Both reminded me about a familiar object, a very worn leather belt that had been in her top right dresser drawer for almost 70 years. At the end of 1942, my mother, Minna Rosenberg, was 14 years old. She was escaping her second ghetto in Poland, embarking on the unknown deep into the forest nearby. As she left, her father took this worn belt and wrapped it over her coat. At the time, this belt was a means of warmth and a token of her father's love. Over time, each notch of the belt would come to represent core tenets of her life: warmth, security, support, perseverance, resourcefulness, love, and most important, family. Today, I don't leave the house without checking the weather, directions, and with the pandemic, always taking a mask. I go by car, not by foot or horse and buggy. My destination is known, hers wasn't. As my mother fled the Kristallnacht ghetto at the age of 14 in 1942, without time to think about the magnitude of her decision, there was no preparation, no plan, only survival. For a little history on how my mother got to be the proud owner of her father's belt and became the woman she is today. The notch of warmth, the shtetl. My mother grew up in a shtetl, which is a small village. It was in Haraduk, Poland. It had no running water or electricity and no motor vehicles. But my mother wrote and spoke about her childhood as being idyllic, filled with friends, school, peaceful Sabbath and holidays, the spirit, the ruach, the warmth, the Hamish environment, the joyous Freilich surrounding, and the familiar smells of Jewish cooking. In the fall of 1939, she was not even 11 years old, and the Soviets invaded my mother's shtetl and disrupted her humble, fulfilled life. Lazy Sabbath afternoons of playing and singing with her twin sister were gone. Now the notch of security. Inside the Haraduk ghetto, now in the fall of 1941, she was only 13 years old. Haraduk became a ghetto with German soldiers and Polish guards surrounding them. My mother had to wear a yellow star on her coat. She was not allowed to walk on the sidewalk. Living in the ghetto meant she was forced out of her own home. The entire Jewish population of the shtetl, about 300 families, were forced to crowd into 10 to 15 houses on one side of the street. Although the living conditions were crowded and unpleasant, my mother recalls being comforted by the security of her family being together. Surviving selection and liquidation in her Haraduk ghetto was accomplished by hiding in her uncle's underground bunker. My mother heard the Germans walking overhead and stayed very still. Once the Germans left, she escaped by walking all night long with her mother, father, and twin sister from the Haraduk ghetto to the Kristallnacht ghetto. Kristallnacht was the last remaining ghetto in the area, housing all the people whose villages had been destroyed. The entire family escaped this time. The rest of the inhabitants of the Haraduk ghetto were killed. My mother and her family were spared. Now the notch of support. In the Kristallnacht ghetto, also a labor camp, my mother worked alongside her mother in and around the kitchen for the German soldiers. She described to me being hungry all the time, dreaming of food day and night. She recalled seeing the small rolls for the German soldiers, but did not even take a morsel. Her fear and strong character prevented it. She was living through hell, but considered herself lucky to have the support of an intact family. The notch of perseverance, the will to survive and escape. In late 1942, she was 14 years old. My mother experienced more horrific things than one should have had in a lifetime. She witnessed a Nazi soldier shoot a beautiful young woman just to see if she would be as beautiful dead. As Nazi power grew, she was forced to make the risky decision to flee the forest with a farmer she did not know. Her oldest brother, who was a resistance fighter, a partisan, sent a letter to the family with a local farmer. Her brother begged them to leave before the Kristallnacht ghetto would be destroyed. She left with her middle brother. No one else from the family left the ghetto that night. Her twin sister had typhoid and was 2 weak, so her parents stayed behind. Fast forward to March of 1943. Her family is still in Kristallnacht. She's in the woods. The same farmer makes a second and last attempt to smuggle the rest of the family out of the ghetto. My grandmother, Bubby Esther, left that night and was reassured by her husband, my grandfather, that he would leave in short order once my mother's twin sister was better and able to make the trip. My grandmother made it out 2 days before all the inhabitants of the Kristallnacht ghetto were shot and burned. My grandfather and my mother's twin perished March 17th, 1943, on the eve of Purim. Now for the notch of resourcefulness. My mother's fleeing of both ghettos was evidence that she had a strong will to live. But the years in the woods challenged her. She lived deep in the forest for 2 long, cold winters. She built an underground bunker in the cold weather and used twigs as a bed. She was only 15 years old, and the main source of food came from begging the local villagers in the middle of the night. The brutalities my mother experienced could have made her angry and bitter, but as anyone who has met her, they know she is neither. My mother taught me by example the importance of family. Sabbath was always together with my cousins. Holidays, we shared the preparations and the celebrations. There was homemade challah bread and more baked goods than anyone needed. Always having someone less fortunate at the table was the norm to share the warmth of our family. The family mantra was, it could always be worse, no matter how bad it was. Both my parents were Holocaust survivors. They sent me to Hebrew school, dance classes, piano lessons, and sleepaway camp. They had so little, but gave it all to me. No sacrifice was too much, and that comes with the burden to keep their story alive and prove the Nazis wrong about the Jews. Now, the notch of love and family. My mother is selfless, strong, resilient, accepting, not mean or bitter. Her home was open and loving. There was room for all, always able to add another to the table. If the table had the capacity for 6, you could have 12. There was always enough chicken soup for everyone. Just add a little more hot water.
When I was little, the stretching of the chicken soup or crowded apartments weren't really sources of pride, and that there were sources of embarrassment. As I've matured, the no food waste antics have stuck and have become integral to my views on sustainability and nourishment. We used to save the neck of the chicken for Bubby, and now it goes to my mom. And typically my freezer is half filled with saved chicken bones for soup. So the trait of resourcefulness seems to be hereditary. Beyond resourcefulness, I regularly witness the qualities embedded in my Bubby's belt, in my mother, and in myself. My mom grew up next to her first cousins, who became akin to 2 additional sisters, one of which joined us today. And I grew up with a similarly small family that blurred formal familial ties. My mom and Bubby have the unique ability to make something out of nothing, such as the chicken soup, adding a piano bench to the table to seat more guests. They also know when and how to make nothing out of something, such as not letting inconveniences and hassles derail a special moment. I aspire to emulate them both daily. During one of those cold masked visits, my 92-year-old Bubby met my boyfriend for the first time. Neither people of many words, their interaction was short but sweet. Bubby even snuck in a quip that her fur-lined floral cape wouldn't suit Michael. After just that short interaction, Michael shared with me that I'm just like Bubby, drawing a direct through line between the 3 generations of strong, resourceful women.
She lived deep in the woods. We live in a house. She went to 5 years of formal education and she knows 5 languages. She took 9 years to attend college at night as she worked and raised her family. Nothing ever seemed to be too hard or too much. I went to college and grad school and only had to take care of myself. My 3 children got their preschool through 8th grade education at a Hebrew day school, followed by the privilege of high school, college, and graduate school. She had a belt. I have way too many and none like hers. Thank you.
That was wonderful, you guys. I love how you used the belt as a metaphor and talked about all the amazing characteristics of your mom and your grandmother, and your story was just such a beautiful testament to her. And it really was also making me think about how, after hearing so many stories of people who lived through so many atrocities, how different the after experience is for so many people, and how, you know, your mom took that experience to be like, we're just going to welcome everybody. We're going to, if there's 6 seats, we'll have 12 seats. And that's just really incredible. She sounds amazing. So thank you so much for sharing her with me. Also, I didn't realize it, but I was your son's teacher. I realized that. I was like, wait a minute, I know these people. And Rachel, I remember you when you were very little. So we're going to have to catch up. And the rest of you, enjoy your intermission. We're going to take a 10-minute intermission. Now, oh, it's exactly 3 o'clock. How perfect. Well, it's 3 o'clock here in Connecticut. You might be somewhere else. So we are going to come back at 10 after the hour, whatever hour it is where you are. Go do your intermission stuff. If you want to write comments to the storytellers in the chat, this is a great time to do that. If you want to tell us the most wonderful place you visited, do that too. And we'll see you back here at 10 after. Thank you.
Good job. Good.
And Sally, FYI, you're not on mute right now. So just, yep, okay. All right, everybody. It's 3:10 here in Connecticut. It's 10 after. Good. I'm watching people pop back in. Great. I hope you're all refreshed and ready for stories in the second half. If you turned your devices on, you might want to turn them back off. Wait, let me change this. This is distracting on the screen. Close it. Okay. All right. Let's get started. Here we go. So our next speaker is Kristallnacht Nishimwe. I'm practicing. I really want to make sure I'm saying that correctly because it's so important to get people's names correct. And it is respectful. So Kristallnacht is a French name. And how am I doing with that? Kristallnacht Nishimwe. Okay, good. Kristallnacht lives in New York and is a motivational speaker, a defender of women's rights, and the author of a memoir about surviving the Rwandan genocide. She has been recognized with numerous awards for her speaking, writing, and advocacy. Kristallnacht says she's addicted to tea and loves to dance, although she says she's not a good dancer, but somehow I feel like she's got the soul and vibe of a dancer, and I bet you're wonderful. When I asked about her favorite place she's ever visited, Kristallnacht said San Francisco, California. And her reason was surprising to me. She said, the reason why I love it is because of how hilly it is. It reminded me immediately of my home country, Rwanda. I thought that was really interesting. I didn't know that they had that in common. Before Kristallnacht begins, you guys, I want to tell you that this might be an especially difficult story to listen to. And if you have children listening with you today, this might be a good time to have them slip out. There's going to be some things in here you might not want them to hear. So with that, let me introduce Kristallnacht Nishimwe.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for your kind introduction. Growing up as a young girl in Rwanda, I cherish beautiful memories with my both parents and my siblings. I was born in a small town in the western province of the country. And I was very fortunate to have amazing parents who were teachers and siblings, and also a beautiful family. I have beautiful memories when I used to visit my grandparents, my uncles, my aunts, and having a lot of great fun with my cousins. So I cherish those beautiful memories. And also when I was a little girl, because I was a daddy's girl, so I remember walking to school with my dad and holding hands. He would tell me stories, and I remember all those beautiful memories when I went to see my uncles and beautiful things. They would tell me stories, and my grandparents who told me stories, because I come in a culture where we are oral storytelling. So all those memories, I cherish them a lot. I hold them dearly to my heart. But I never thought that all the things I cherished as a little girl will be cut short when I was 14 years old. In 1994, I was 14 years old. Many of you know that we had a genocide, which took more than 1 million of Tutsis in the country. And at the time when I was young, even though my parents gave me a beautiful home and a loving place and affection, of course, I knew that as a Tutsi, I was not accepted in the country. You know, I remember when I was the first time I faced that discrimination, being a Tutsi. I was young. I was in junior high school. That's when I could remember very well when I was bullied by a classmate because she was taught at her home because she was a Hutu. The Hutus were the ones who were actually persecuting the Tutsis. Many of you know that historically, because the reason why we had these majority Hutus discriminating against the Tutsis is because when the Belgians came in the country, they did what they call divide and conquer. So they issued ID cards, which was mentioning that we are Tutsis and Hutus. So when they left the country, because of how they divided these two group of people and making us ethnic groups, when we were supposed to be social classes, that's why the Hutus who were in the power at that time persecuted the Tutsis. So, and I grew up in that environment. So, but of course, my parents managed to give me a home where I felt confident and loved. So, in 1994, there was a genocide which was a plan to eliminate the minority Tutsis. So, I remember when we left home, like many other Tutsis, we had to leave our home and go into hiding for 3 months. We never knew that it was going to be the way it happened. I never knew that the people I loved, everything I cherished was going to be taken from me. I found myself and my siblings, my mom, my dad. I was the oldest in my family, and I had a sister. I had 3 younger brothers. We're from ages 14, 11, 9, 7, and 16 months old. So we found ourselves, like many other Tutsis, going to hiding for 3 months, and our homes were completely destroyed. Everything we had was destroyed. And now we had to go into hiding. So the people who were going to hide us were going to be Hutus who were friends of us, people who we knew, because in our village, my parents being teachers, of course, they have taught so many people, many kids in the area. So I've seen people come in our home, and I've seen many people, my parents having great friends and families and everybody that I thought maybe we'll find places to hide. But unfortunately, because of how the hatred of was being taught against the Tutsi in the country, of course, many majority Hutus allowed themselves to kill their own neighbors, Tutsis, simply because they were Tutsi. And during those 3 months, I've seen unimaginable horrors at that age that I would never wish for anybody to see. I've experienced things that have left me consequences that I will live with for the rest of my life. And I remember April 15th, which was one of the first, I would say the first and the worst days of my life, when we found ourselves hiding in the bushes. My parents, my dad, and my mom, and my paternal aunt, who happened to come with us because the rest of our family members were hiding in other places. We never knew what happened to them. So as we were hiding there, I'll never forget at that time when the killers, of course, who were allowed themselves to start killing Tutsis, and they surrounded the bushes. They were calling us cockroaches and snakes, which is a dehumanizing language that was being used against the Tutsis. And I will never forget the fear I had in my body. And of course, my mom kept telling all of us to pray in our hearts where we were sitting. But I never imagined the image of my dad, where he was sitting and trembling and afraid. And my dad was very close to me, my best friend, but I consider him as a very strong person. But to see him in a position where I will never be able to help and do anything, it's something that will never leave my mind. So, and my aunt also, who was so afraid. As we were coming out in the bushes, of course, all of us were all together, and the killers took everything we had. Of course, we had to figure out other places to hide again. It was early in the morning and around 5 in the morning. So we had to figure out, so going through the bushes and avoid going to the main roads because there were roadblocks everywhere. So we had to figure out who was kind enough to take us in their home. So we were able to reach to a home, of course, as you know, climbing the little hills because we are a hilly country. As we reached to this home, there was a young lady who was sitting outside, and other people, they took my younger brother from my dad, and the rest of us followed inside. We went in the house. So, and that day, actually, before we got there, of course, my aunt was killed. I forgot to mention that I didn't see it. Some of my siblings saw what happened. So as we were in that house, the killers followed my dad. Later on that day, I'll never forget. And it was something that I never thought that I was going to hear in my ears while we were hiding in the ceiling, that my dad was murdered by them. And for me, I couldn't believe this human being who has been so kind and taking care of kids and being a good educator his whole life, and now simply because of who he was murdered. So I cried. I didn't know what to do. Of course, during that time, we didn't know where to go anymore. So my mom kept taking all of us wherever she could find somewhere to take us. And it was a rainy season. It was painful time, and we were hungry most of the time, and it was not easy. So for me, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had a home, but I'm no longer allowed to be in my home anymore. So my home was gone, and I remember one time my mom, when we were discovering where we were hiding, because we hid in several places, we have seen a lot of horrible things, and people who were considered to be good friends, people who were considered to be part of their families, now they turn against us, they call killers on us. So, and for me to see that, I couldn't believe how people have changed, people's heart have completely changed, because what I knew was love in my home, but now I'm seeing the opposite of that. So, and I remember when these killers found us, because every time my mom would have to carry my younger brother on her back, or sometimes holding my younger brother on her chest whenever we're sitting in the bushes. So, and I remember when they took her, of course, the rest of us kids, we didn't know if she was going to survive. And later on that day, the man who was hiding us told me and my siblings to leave our home to go find her. My mom later on, she was taken, because we had to learn that later on when we arrived to a home where they took us in and they gave us a warm, because even getting there was not easy. It was a long journey. So we had to go through bushes and be able to get to that home. And they told us that my mom, the killers decided to leave her to a neighbor because they didn't want to kill her right away. So the killers actually decided to come back and search for me and my siblings. So they couldn't find us. And when they told us what happened and where they left her, we decided to go to her. So because whatever happened, the genocide was still happening everywhere throughout the country. And we didn't know we were going to survive. The only thing we needed just to be together, even if we would be killed together. So, and as we arrived where our mom was, to that neighbor, we held each other, we prayed together. My mom took us in a room, we prayed together because they decided to kill my brothers. When that day came, my brothers, who were young boys, because immediately during the genocide, boys were killed, men were killed. Women were not immediately killed because rape was used as a weapon. And and they decided to kill my brothers. What we did, we prayed, but we were hoping that we'll beg them to kill all of us. So that day they didn't want to kill all of us. They took my brothers, and I never imagined seeing my brothers. It's an image that really hurts me so bad, to see my brothers walking, being taken by killers. Among one of them was someone who grew up with my mom, and all of us crying, begging, but they refused, and snatched my younger brother from my mom. It's painful for me. So, and they took them and slaughtered them and threw their bodies in a septic tank of our home. And the rest of us, my mom, my sister, we didn't know if we were going to survive. We kept hiding, even though we didn't want to hide anymore. So we went to a home, which was a short distance where we were. This woman took us in, and later on, the husband came. He was with a neighbor whom I have seen all my life, and my coming to our home, and their family members used to come to our home. And he decided to pull me from everybody. So, and I couldn't believe what he was doing to me. And this man who came with him who belongs in that home, refused to even stop him. So he didn't stop him. My mom screamed, and they pushed her away. So I was beaten by this man without going in a lot of details. Fortunately, I was taken not too far from our home and raped by him. And he was hoping that many other killers will come and torture me, because during the genocide, a lot of girls like myself and women, some of them were tortured by several of them and raped them. So, and I would say, to me, it was a miracle for me to find myself leaving that place and go back again, and to see if my mom was still alive and my sister. Luckily, I found them, and my mom, this woman, they took care of my injuries. Imagine the image of a parent to see what happened to her only child, her daughter. So as we were there, of course, I wanted to be killed. I didn't want to be alive anymore. So it was not easy for me. And we were able to find a place in a Muslim community where someone has heard, because everybody was having a talk everywhere, who was alive, who was still alive, and what happened to us. And this man took us in his home, and that's how we're able to survive. My mom, my sister, and we found out that many of our family members were murdered on both sides. On my dad's side, almost everybody was killed. On my mom's side, at least I have a few family members who survived. And because those who were the Tutsis who were in exile were the ones who stopped the genocide in July. So after, when I survived the genocide, of course, I was living with the pain and suffering. Later on, I found that because of rape, I contracted HIV. I'm one of the many girls and women who live without consequences, even beyond that. And some of them have children who are 27 years now who were born from rape. So luckily, I survived with a parent. I have friends who lost the entire family. So, and my mom, who is the most courageous woman I've never known in my life. So she went back to teach. Of course, she had to take care of me and my sister. We had to rebuild a new home. And she showed kindness and love, even to those who have done horrible things to us. To me, that was a perfect example of how I should live in my life, despite the pain I carry within myself. So And I was very fortunate to come in this country. Of course, I carried my pain and everything you can imagine within me. I thought maybe I was going to forget it, but that was not going to be easy for me. But when I decided to go to therapy and write my story, was the beginning of my healing journey. So, and looking again to how my mom was living a life the way she told me to keep loving, to never hate, I wanted to continue also living that life despite the pain I carry within myself. So one thing that has helped me in my life is to remind myself that I should never give up on hope. And there's a mantra that I live with. No matter what horrible circumstances you may face in your life, never lose hope. For losing hope is the beginning of your own self-defeat. I just want to leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Well, whew, it's hard to follow that and know what to say. That was beautifully told, and obviously a lot to take in. You are an amazing survivor and so brave to be sharing your story. And I just, the whole time you were telling your story, thinking about how people sharing their stories like this is so important. It's so much more important than the news, because I mean, I'm obviously, speak up, I'm biased, but you see stories like this on the news of what's happening in places. And I think it's easy to know that that is horrible and to know that it's atrocities going on. When somebody is in front of you telling their story to you about what happened to them and their families, and I'm thinking about my family and my bushes and my neighbors, it becomes so much more personal and impossible to turn away. And so telling your story is a service to everybody. And you know, I know it's a cliche to say that somebody is an inspiration, but the fact that you take your story and share it and have other people learn that they can, that if you and your family survive that, we can survive what we're dealing with. And so thank you for that. That's a gift for everybody. So thank you. All right, we're all gonna take a breath and we're going to prepare ourselves to hear our next story. Constantly, I hope you feel us all sending you our love. And we're gonna hear from Matt. We're gonna hear from Matt. Matt, my husband. He is a storyteller. He's a 5th grade teacher. He's an author. He conducted all the workshops with the people in this group. And still, after doing the workshops and teaching and writing his books, does most of the laundry in the house, fixes breakfast for our children every day. He just gets it done. He's a superhero. His favorite place in the world is Yagoo Scout Reservation in Rockville, Rhode Island, which we visited this summer and is absolutely gorgeous. It's the Boy Scout camp Matt went to every summer of his childhood. And here's what he said. It's my favorite place in the world, the place where I spent my summers learning independence and confidence, where I became tug of war champion, underwear up the flagpole expert, middle of the night prankster. The first place I ever took. Somebody's off mute. So if you guys could just check your, there we go. Okay. Oh no, we're still off mute. Can you guys all? Matt muted everybody and now I'm unmuting myself. I'm going to go back to the flagpole underwear expert, middle of the night prankster, the first place I ever took the stage, the first place I learned to play poker, the place where I was constantly, gloriously in trouble. I miss it every day. I can attest that he's managed to get himself in plenty of trouble right here in Connecticut. And luckily we do not have a flagpole. Please welcome Matthew Dix.
not be hard to install one, honey. Should get a flagpole and I can teach you. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for being here. The hot dog was the riskiest part of my plan. Alicia and I both rightfully believe that the only proper way to eat a hot dog is without any condiments whatsoever. It is already perfection and does not need to be altered in any way. When she told me that on one of our first dates, it truly made me believe that we were perfect for each other, that we were made to be together. But the hot dog in front of me is not entirely plain. It doesn't have any condiments per se on it, but it is a very special hot dog. It is wrapped entirely in bacon. And then on top of it, it has chili and cheese and onions. Truth be told, I can't actually see the hot dog, but I know it is somewhere under there. But it is not the kind of hot dog that I would normally choose. I'm the kind of person who believes that once you find something that is good, you should stick to that thing and not risk peril. Alicia is entirely the opposite. She will go to Trader Joe's looking for her favorite cracker. She'll find her favorite cracker, and then next to her favorite cracker will be the newly flavored, like chicken tikka masala flavored cracker dusted with, onion powder and dipped in root beer. And she'll think to herself, I like all of those things. It probably will work well on a cracker, which is why my pantry is filled with boxes of half-eaten crackers that no one will ever finish. She believes in adventure when it comes to food. I believe in sticking to what you know. But on this day, I have not stuck to what I know because I need this hot dog to be special. I need it to be an excellent hot dog. It's got to be right. Everything else about my plan is not risky at all. I have my computer open. I have the Peacock network on the internet, and I'm getting ready to watch The Office. I don't know if The Office is my favorite television show of all time, but those people in that show are my favorite fictional human beings ever. They feel like my friends. My favorite character in The Office is Dwight. If I could be friends with Dwight, I would be friends with that crazy beet farmer in a second. But honestly, the people I feel most connected to are Jim and Pam, because oddly, Jim and Pam's relationship, the way they fell in love, was so similar to the way that Alicia and I fell in love. Two coworkers, a boy and a girl, looking at each other across the way. When Jim and Pam first meet, Pam is engaged to be married. When Matt meets Alicia, she's involved with another person. Alicia is lovely, and like Pam and like Jim, I am brilliant and I am clever and I am funny and I am handsome. And as those two sort of fell in love, Alicia and I also fell in love. So I feel connected to these people. This is my go-to show when I need joy in my life, and on this day I need joy. And so the episode I'm watching, the one that always guarantees me joy, is the Jim and Pam wedding episode where they get on the Maid of the Mist and they get married. That is ready to go. The hot dog is in front of me. Right behind me is Caramel Sutra ice cream, the Ben & Jerry's Caramel Sutra. If you've never tried it, it's the best ice cream there ever was. It's in the freezer ready to go. And I've got Toby, my cat, who I can put on my lap. I will pet him. He will purr. It is this beautiful feedback loop that I will create. I am trying to ensconce myself in the greatest amount of happiness I can possibly find, because in about an hour, I have to go into my office and I have to open a meeting and meet my storytellers, the Voices of Hope storytellers, the people you've seen here today. It's going to be the first time they tell me their stories. And this is not my first rodeo. I know what is about to happen to me. They're about to tell me stories that are going to break my heart and ruin my soul and ruin my day. There was a time 5 years ago, before I began Voices of Hope, where the Holocaust to me was something that happened a long time ago that was in black and white. But ever since I began working with Voices of Hope, that black and white long time ago thing has become more and more real to me as I've met the people who have been impacted by it, and this year met people who actually were impacted by genocide personally. And so I know I need to gird myself so that I can hear these stories and hold myself together. And as I click on the meeting and open it and I begin to hear the stories, I hear Linda's story and I hear Consolee's story and I hear Sally and Rachel's story. As these stories start coming in, I realize how stupid it is that hot dogs and The Office and Caramel Sutra ice cream and a cat will not save me from the heartache that I am about to feel. That no matter what I do, the stories that I'm about to hear are going to break my heart and punch me in the gut. And as I hear them, I start to realize how stupid that is, how stupid it is to even attempt to gird myself, to mollify myself from these stories, that's not the purpose of it, that the purpose of it is for me to hear the stories to let them break my heart and punch me in the gut and to learn the things that I'm supposed to learn. It is the whole reason I am doing this thing. It is the whole reason we are all here today, to hear these stories, absent those things that are going to make us feel better, because it's not our job to feel better today. It's our job today to understand what happened and to not forget. And yet, as I listen to every story, there's always hope in them too. Somehow these storytellers, whoever they are, they always find some hope at the end of every story. And so as I listen to them, I forget about the hot dog and the ice cream and the cat, and I just listen for the little bit of hope that I know they're going to offer me at the end of their tragedy, at the end of whatever terrible thing they're going to tell me about. They're going to finally get to a little bit of light at the end, and that is what I will hold on to. That is the thing, not the things that will make me feel good before the meeting, but that is the thing I'll carry after the meeting that will make me feel a little bit better. And if you're feeling that way right now, we have one more story to go. But if you're feeling that way that I do, I advise you to listen to the last story we're about to hear. And then when this meeting ends, when this show ends, go sit somewhere with someone, which is what I did that night. When the show ended, I left the office and I went into the living room and I sat next to Alicia. We watched a television show to make us laugh. Alicia and I hold hands when we watch TV every night, as silly as that sounds, we do. And so I sat next to my wife with the stories in my heart and the hope in my heart, holding the hand of my wife and hoping for better days and hoping for this day when these storytellers could tell you these amazing stories and they could shine in the way they deserve to shine, and they can bring back the history as it deserves to be brought back, and that they could share all of these things with you so that you could go forward with the same little bit of hope in your heart that I have today, hearing these amazing people tell these amazing things. Thank you.
I can clap in real time
Yes,
with
I know,
sound here in our house.
Thank you, honey.
Well done, honey. You did a great job describing what this is and why we do it. Very, very good. All right.
The hot dog was great.
The hot dog was great, he wants you all to know.
Fantastic.
It was great. Okay.
Doogies. Knew it.
Doogies. Yes, that's if you're in Connecticut, there is a place that's devoted to hot dogs on the Berlin Turnpike, which is fantastic. Okay, moving along. Closing our show this afternoon is Hannah Zwiebel. Hannah is a local and lives in West Hartford, Connecticut. Hannah works in a niche pension market, which is pension risk transfer, and is currently on the administrative side of this business. That whole sentence, I feel like, is so serious and mathy that I find it intimidating. Hannah has 3 young daughters and enjoys hiking, reading, and playing mahjong, though she also said hobbies. Who has time for hobbies? Which I completely feel you on that, Hannah. In response to my question about her favorite place she's ever visited, she decided to take the question in a different direction, thinking more along the lines of the most memorable place she's ever been, and here's what she said. A timely response to go with this theme: it's not necessarily the favorite place I've ever been to, but my favorite travel scene. In high school, I went on a teen tour trip to Poland and Israel. After 10 days in Poland, visiting concentration camps, cemeteries, and what remains of Jewish life in Poland, we boarded a plane late at night and arrived in Israel early the next morning. Instead of going to our hotel, our bus drove to the Te'elat in Jerusalem, which is the promenade, and we watched the sun rise over Jerusalem. The most memorable first view of a city. After seeing the destruction of Poland, to see all the homeland of the Jewish people come alive at dawn was spectacular. To this day, I cannot go to Israel without going back to the same place and seeing the views of the city. It really does sound spectacular. Please welcome Hannah Zwiebel. Hannah Zwiebel.
Thank you. When I was 12, I embarked on a journey like many boys and girls before me. I began preparing for my bat mitzvah, and at the heart of my preparations was my father. My dad wasn't going to let the rabbi or the cantor of my synagogue do all the preparations. He wanted to take an active role as well. It might have something to do with the fact that my sister never had a bat mitzvah, so he wanted to make sure he got this one right. Or maybe it was the teacher in him, or maybe it was the strong egalitarian spirit that he had. But he wanted to make sure I was the first girl in our synagogue to read the whole Torah portion. And he also wanted to make sure that I was the first kid in my synagogue who could understand it both in English and in Hebrew. So night after night, we would sit at our kitchen table and we would go back and forth between the English and the Hebrew translation to make sure I knew every single word. And there were nights that we would yell, and there were nights when there would be tears, mostly mine. But time and time again, my dad said to me, you must keep doing this. You must be strong. Education and learning are the most important things. And that would make me think of my dad when he was 12 years old. When my dad was 12 years old, he too should have begun to prepare for his bar mitzvah with his father in that same Jewish rite of passage. But my dad didn't have that luxury. He wasn't living in normal times. My dad was from Nyíregyháza, Hungary, and my dad was 12 years old in June of 1944. He had left the ghetto in his hometown and was hiding with a non-Jewish family outside of Budapest. The last time he saw his father, he said, my grandfather said to him, you know, this is where our family papers and our money is hidden. You must remember where all of this is. And he told him, these are the names and addresses of our family in Hungary and in the United States. You must memorize these names and know exactly where to go. And he also told him about the importance of survival and of learning. Study and learn as much as you can, he said to my father. You must be strong. You must survive. Education and learning are the most important things. When I was 12 and a half, a friend of mine in school broke her leg and was on crutches. It seemed natural for me to try to help her out, so I offered to carry her backpack, which was one less burden for her when she was dealing with being on crutches. It was a very simple thing, and I never thought about it again. In fact, this girl moved away before high school, and it really never, ever crossed my mind again. But years later, we reconnected on Facebook, and she sought me out to say thank you. Something that I had completely forgotten about had stuck with her for so long, and she wanted to take the time to thank me because she never forgot the kindness I shared with her and the help that I gave to her. Even for that short period of time, it made her life that much easier. Sometimes the kindness of a friend can go a long way, and sometimes the kindness and thoughtfulness of new friends can actually save your life. My dad was captured trying to escape into Romania in August of 1944, before he was 12 and a half, and he found himself on a train headed for Auschwitz. When he got there, he was on one of those infamous selection lines when a boy who was of similar age and height as him and probably similar enough appearance approached him and asked if he wanted to pretend to be a twin with this other boy. My dad, hearing that it might save his life, or at least, will lead to not imminent death and slightly preferred treatments, my dad quickly said yes. And so he and this boy, Mishu, were quickly whisked away to block 10, the medical experimental block. And so for the next 2 weeks, they were poked and prodded. They had daily injections and their daily blood samples taken, but they also had food and shelter. And for that period of time, they were spared from the brutal hard labor that everyone else had to endure. But then one day, Mishu didn't return. My dad heard from other cellmates in Block 10 that Mishu had been killed. My dad assumed that if he did nothing, a similar fate would await him as well. So the next day, when he was taken out of his cell, he excused himself and said he had to use the restroom. And he just simply walked out of Block 10. There were no guards near Block 10, so he just started walking. And he kept on walking until he found Block 26, a nearby block, because the doors were open. And he quickly changed his clothes with the clothes of one of the corpses on the floor, and he took on a new identity. No one from Block 10 came looking for this boy who ran away, or maybe was presumed dead. And no one asked any questions to this new stranger who arrived in Block 26. He simply moved into the shadows and anonymity of the main Auschwitz camp. He will certainly never be able to thank this stranger who became his closest friend, his twin, and perhaps his savior for a few weeks, but he certainly never forgot what he did for my father. After that, my dad blended in and became part of the working camp at Auschwitz, working from sun up to sundown, hardly enough food, horrible living conditions. My dad kept to himself. He never wanted to stand out. And soon he became numb to his surroundings. Then one night, it was the middle of October, walking back from work detail, someone started to chant the Kol Nidre melody, the melody from the holiest of prayers on the holiest of days for the Jewish people. My dad could not believe it. Here he was, struggling to put one foot in front of the other. In the midst of all of this horror, my dad could barely survive himself. He was numb to everything else. But here was someone who not only cared enough about religion still, but was human enough and aware enough to know what day it was and to want to celebrate this holiest of days. My dad used to tell me, religion must be felt in your heart. And ever since that time he heard Kol Nidre, my dad has prayed. When he was in Auschwitz, he never thought he would wake up the next morning when he went to sleep. So when he woke up, he would say a prayer, thanking God that he was alive. When he had no one else in the camps with him, when he felt all alone and not really even human, when he had no food or no companionship or anything else, he had God. He had no other explanation for how he survived. So even after the war, my dad continued to pray, thankful first that he survived, and then thankful for everything that he has and all the blessings that he has been given. Every year, when I hear the Kol Nidre melody to symbolize the start of Yom Kippur, I hear that prayer and I think back to my dad and that's hearing that same prayer with the same melody and the same. I think about the year that he spent listening to Kol Nidre, not in the comforts of his own synagogue, but in a concentration camp. When my dad was 13, he was liberated from Auschwitz and just starting to rebuild his life after the war. When I was 13, I celebrated my bat mitzvah, not just for me, but for the bar mitzvah my dad was never able to have. Thank you.
Very, very, very well done. Thank you so much, Hannah. You guys, first of all, I'm listening to that whole story and thinking about my own daughter upstairs who is 12 and will be 13 in January. And it just, the resilience and I mean, I don't even know how people find themselves in these situations and come up with solutions like that boy and what your dad did. The survival skills are just so amazing and incredible to think about. Every one of these stories today, you guys celebrate the bravery and the intelligence and the kindness and the connection and the triumph of the spirit over all of this. And thank you so much, all of you, for working so hard on these stories and for sharing them with us. I think we hear them and it makes us better and it makes us better equipped to know what's out there still right now, that we can't turn away from it and that there's real people living it. And it's all of our responsibility to bear witness to it and do what we can. So thank you, storytellers, for sharing all of that. And audience, very nice job. Good applause. Let's do a firework. Let's give all of our storytellers a firework. Ready? You go like this. Excellent. Nicely done. Good fireworks, you guys. Thank you, everyone at Voices of Hope and storytellers and audience. And now I get to introduce Adele Jacobs. Adele is the first vice president of Speak Up. I don't know if that means Adele. I don't know if it's like, are you the very first or there's more than one? There's more
There's
than
more
one.
than one.
There's more than one, but you're the first vice president of Voices of Hope. And also Adele told a story in one of the other showcases. So I'm thrilled to see you and to introduce you, Adele Jacobs.
Great to see you too, Alicia. Good afternoon, everybody. As you heard, my name is Adele Jacobs, and I am the daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors, Fred and Regina Jacobs of blessed memory, and the first vice president of Voices of Hope. So first, I'd like to give another virtual round of applause to our incredible storytellers this afternoon. So thank you, really. You are all wonderful, and we're all empowered by your courage to tell your stories. And as a past participant of Speak Up, I know how much work and emotion goes into preparing for today. So our sincerest congratulations to you all. Second, let's celebrate our wonderful hosts, Matt and Alicia Dix. Really, you continue to amaze us. We can't thank you enough for your partnership and for sharing your incredible talent with us, and Matt, your incredible storytelling abilities. Each year, you show us the true craft and art of master storytelling. This is our 7th Speak Up Showcase, and we're so grateful for the service you've done for the now growing club of almost 45 participants. Amazing. We'd also like to thank ADL for their support and co-sponsorship of today's program. It's so important that our organizations work together to fight hate, wherever it is. To our audience, thank you for joining us for today's 7th showcase and first showcase featuring a survivor and descendants of the Holocaust, Bosnia, and Rwanda. Preparing the next generation to use their voices has always been a goal for Voices of Hope. And to be here today at our 7th Speak Up is a true accomplishment and honor. We had hoped to be in person today, but of course, safety is always our first priority. So thank you for your continued support of our virtual programming. We had a record number of people that were signed into this today, and also we'll see this again virtually. So our deepest gratitude goes to our incredibly generous donors who make events like today's possible, and who share our passion and commitment to the voices of our descendants and survivors. If you enjoyed today's program and would like to donate to Voices of Hope, please go to the link in the chat to do so. Each donation helps us to achieve our mission of promoting a culture of courage to stand up against hatred through Holocaust and genocide education and remembrance. We are so fortunate to have active Voices of Hope volunteers, board members, and educators to help us pass the lessons of the Holocaust and other genocides on to our future generations. And now we have several new members of that group. So thank you all again, all of our speakers. We can't change the past, unfortunately. We can only hope that these stories and life lessons will positively affect the future. Voices of Hope has a few events coming up. Our virtual Evening of Hope is on Wednesday, November 17th, and we hope you can join us to celebrate our 13th anniversary.
Adele, you hit mute. There you go.
I don't know where I stopped, but
the anniversary.
Oh, anniversary. Okay, thank you. I don't know how that happened. Please see the chat for the registration link for our Evening of Hope. It should prove to be a very special evening. International Holocaust Remembrance Day is taking place on Sunday, January 30th, 2022. So please save the date. To learn about all of our upcoming events, please be sure to visit our website and social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn for regular updates on programs and initiatives. Thank you again for joining us today. Be well, stay safe, and we hope to see you at our next event. Thank you again.
Everybody.